Dallas Cowboys cornerback Trayvon Diggs has a monster practice on Tuesday. How much should we expect of this going forward? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, the Cowboys wrapped up practice on Tuesday, another very loud practice, which is what I'm just calling all the Oxnard practices this year. But the star of practice from Tuesday was none other than Trayvon Diggs. He had 2 interceptions into the team periods. How much more can we expect from Trayvon Diggs? Because that was a pretty incredible performance.
Yeah, I mean, 2 interceptions, and then I think at least another 2 pass breakups on top of that. Yeah, it was really an exciting day for him. I think it actually started out with him getting beat deep by, was it Gallup maybe on a team drill, and then after that he was basically unstoppable, or I guess he was only stoppable. No one's doing anything on him.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen him kind of ramp up into this a little bit. Obviously, he started out camp, on the not the injury list, but off to the side a little bit after dealing with a little bit of a sore toe. And he's kind of gradually made his way back. I mean, look how far we've come just since Jerry kind of wrongfully told us, hey, Trayvon may not be back until Dallas. Who knows? And then suddenly 15 minutes after that comment, he's on the practice field. And now we've gotten to where we are today, where he was the dominant force of practice and kind of showing us a little bit of a preview of what's to come in the regular season.
Maybe that's just a sign that you shouldn't listen to what Jerry Jones says very much. I mean, typically if you just ignore what he says, you'll probably be okay. Honestly, none of this is surprising to me. We talked about this when Diggs signed the contract, that he just hasn't been a cornerback for very long. So I'm not going to be surprised if he gets even better going into, is this year 4 now for him, right? This is year 4.
NFL,
Year 4 of being in the NFL, only his 6th year being a cornerback at any level. I kind of expect Diggs to have maybe his best season this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's every reason to expect that he still has room to grow. He's gotten better the last 2 years. I think that the interception totals that that wowed everyone, I think, kind of just showed you the ability that he has. But I don't think that was the totality of his game.
No.
And I think that as the rest of his game is growing, he's going to become a more and more valuable player. I mean, I think the threat of him taking the interceptions away from the offense is something that's going to be in offensive players' mind. But beyond that, you have to be able to also prevent the quarterback from even wanting to throw that direction, right? And that's with tight coverage. And that's where it feels like he's really, really improved quite a lot.
So I think 2021 showed you the ceiling of what Diggs can become. 22 showed you the consistency and the floor, right? Like if he can just be a little bit more consistent from game to game, which he was last year.
Yeah.
I mean, he is just such a dynamic player. And it's why the Cowboys felt comfortable giving him that contract extension a year early. Just an awesome player. But I want to talk to you about the cornerback room as a whole, because I was reading a piece on Pro Football Focus today from our guy, John Owning. He did his 53-man roster predictions. By the way, we're not getting into the depth charts because it's so meaningless on August 9th. But in his depth chart, he had Trayvon Diggs, Stephon Gilmore, Deron Bland, Eric Scott, Nashawn Wright, and Jordan Lewis. So 6 corners making the roster. No Kelvin Joseph. How do you think this cornerback room is going to kind of shake itself out?
I think that's as good a guess as any at this point. I mean, I think the spots that we have questions about, I feel like we don't have answers yet, right? And I think it's that Jordan Lewis, Kelvin Joseph spot. I mean, where is Jordan Lewis in his recovery? Like, is he going to be able to play for us week 1? I mean, what happens if you cut Kelvin Joseph and you lose all those more special teams
And
snaps
that's the hard
you've
part
already lost, right?
that's what I'm struggling with Nashawn Wright and Calvin Joseph is I don't know who's the better cornerback at this stage. I don't, but I do know who the better special teamer is. And that to me, that matters a lot in this situation. And if the better special teamer also happens to be the guy that's the better athlete and maybe the higher ceiling, why wouldn't Joseph get that spot over Nashawn Wright?
I mean, I think that's a legitimate argument that's going to be made in those rooms. I think it's really going to be a hard cut down, and I don't think it's necessarily down to just Joseph versus Wright. I think Lewis is going to be thrown in there, and I think depending on if they could get something for Lewis, that could make this kind of decision easier. But I think as it stands right now, they've got some difficult calculus to do, because I do think that it could be boiled down as easy as you've suggested, but I also think that Wright has the ability to play outside, which is a little bit more valuable in this defense, I think, as far as just overall flexibility. But I think that the special teams loss of Joseph weighs heavy, especially this year, because you've already kind of had to give away a lot of special team snaps this year. So I don't think it's as easy as like who's been playing the best at cornerback, the respective spots, especially because, like we mentioned, they're playing different cornerback spots. So they're actually kind of competing for different, spots in this roster. So I think that they have a very difficult cut ahead of them. I think that they're going to, use every bit of these preseason snaps to kind of help them kind of determine this a little bit. I mean, it's been 3 years now. This is right. This is the third year or fourth year with the
third year.
And it feels like they've kind of been passing each other, and it's like they've been weaving through each other, and who's got stock up, who's got stock down. I feel like we're 3 years into this, and I still am not any closer to knowing, who is the more valuable, who's going to be the more valuable player for this team long term.
It's why I still think the easiest solution here is just to leave Jordan Lewis on the PUP, get him back after week 6. And that way you're not rushing him back from his injury. That way he's 100% healthy when you need him, midway through the season. The only problem with that is convincing Jordan Lewis, right? Like if Jordan Lewis is healthy in 3 weeks, he's going to want to be on the field and play, because that's just the way that he is. And he knows that writing is on the wall a little bit on the last year of his contract. He's going to want to play, but I think in an ideal world, you stash him for 6 weeks and you figure it out in week 7 or week 8.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly it is, if Jordan Lewis is actually healthy enough to come off of the list, convincing him not to, it may be difficult. And if you don't, like, what happens then? You make him active, and then suddenly you've got to cut somebody you may not be comfortable cutting, or you may have to trade Jordan Lewis. So it'll be interesting. Again, like that's why there's a lot of moving parts here. And I think it all kind of starts with where is Jordan Lewis's health at the time of the cut down, because I think that's really going to help. If he's still not healthy and we're able to kind of put him on a list, that kind of dictates a lot of things and makes this decision making a lot easier.
The cornerback room is just one that I'm so fascinated to see how it plays out, not only in the preseason, but when we get to cut down days, because now instead of going from 90 to 75 to 53, it's just 90 to 53. One big cut down. And I mean, do any of those guys make it back to the practice squad? Maybe not. There's not a lot of talent at the cornerback position across the league. So I got to believe if the Cowboys cut somebody like Kelvin Joseph, a former 2nd round pick, the odds of him ending back up in Dallas seem relatively low.
Yeah, I agree. And it's just like the defensive end situation, right? Where the Cowboys are known to have a lot of depth at this position. So teams are going to be keeping their eyes on who the Cowboys cut. So likely whoever they cut will be gobbled up.
I want to have a little bit of a debate about this RB2 battle it seemed like it's going on in Dallas right now between your guy, Rico Dowdle, and my guy, Malik Davis. That's not quite true, but
I didn't know we were taking sides.
I didn't know that either, but we can do that. It's fine. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. August is here, and you know what that means. It is the official start of fantasy football drafting month. Get championship ready for your home league by trying out Best Ball on Underdog Fantasy. All you do is one live snake draft, no waivers, no trades, and Underdog sets your best lineup every single week. It's the easiest way to do fantasy football and the most fun. You just get to draft all the time. Try it out with Underdog's Best Ball Mania tournament. It is the largest fantasy football contest ever, and it's back. It's even bigger than ever with $15 million of total prizes up for grabs, including an absurd $3 million going to the winner. Last year, the winner actually drafted their team in July before any of the preseason games started. So don't wait around. Draft your teams now. Visit underdogfantasy.com or find them in the App Store and sign up with promo code Locked On. That's all one word to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. That is Underdog Fantasy promo code Locked On. I use them almost every single day. So if you want to come draft with me, let me know on Twitter. Make sure you use that Underdog code Locked On to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Every dayers. The Cowboys, I don't believe they have practice on Wednesday. So we're going to answer your Twitter questions tomorrow. And then on Friday, we're going to have a little bit more practice recaps, as I believe, Landon, you're still planning on going out to Oxnard, correct?
Yeah, we should have a Thursday night show for a practice recap for sure, and then we'll definitely make sure to cover some preseason game.
Yes.
Pregame stuff.
There we go. We're giving you a bonus episode this week. Didn't even know that. It's even better. So
he just found out right now, guys.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's fine. I'm in. Want to talk about the RB2 battle going on in Dallas right now. It's clear that they're still trying to figure that out. They're rotating players behind Tony Pollard. Ronald Jones is out with an injury, with a groin injury. He's also suspended for the first 2 games of the season. He's also not good.
He's also not part of this conversation.
No, he's not. But Rico Dowdle is having a strong camp. Malik Davis was worked in with the first team running backs yesterday. Who's ahead in this battle?
I mean, let me just preface all this with saying I think they're both having really good camps. Like, I think for me, I have always been of the mind that it's Rico Dowdle's job to lose because to me, like when they've been healthy in the past, he's been the head of the 2 running backs. He's just been higher on the depth chart. That isn't to say that I don't think Malik Davis can't and won't take the job from Rico. I think that certainly is a possibility. He's had a great camp as well. I think both these guys have looked really good. So I do think that there is a battle going on, but I think that it's extremely likely, obviously, that both of these running backs are not only going to make the team, but likely to see carries during the regular season. So I think, the style is what separates these two, right? I mean, I think Davis is more of a kind of a smooth, quick-footed vision type player, right? Who is really kind of no wasted movement in his
he's like a no nonsense runner, like downhill, get to where he needs to go. I don't know if he's going to give you a ton more than what's blocked, but it seems like every time it's blocked well, he's very productive.
He's efficient and he knows what he's doing. And so like there's a trust factor there, I'm sure. That's been nice.
He's just not dynamic, which is unfortunate for him, but you could have a really good NFL career by just doing exactly what you should on every single snap.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, that's the basis of the running backs don't matter argument.
Exactly. I mean, he's really the poster child for that, right?
He's the poster child for it, right? Dowdle, I think, is a little bit more dynamic, more explosive, a bigger back. I mean, he's listed at 218, but he's more than that, I think. So I think that, and I think that if you look at like what you have in Tony Pollard currently, to me, Dowdle seems like the best kind of alternate to that, right? Like
best compliment,
the compliment to that, right? Like where he kind of is a little bit more. He's not more between the tackles, but he's a little bit more physical than Davis, and a little bit.
He's a grinder, right?
Bigger guy, yeah. So he can take a little bit of the more of the hits. If you need him for short yardage stuff, that shouldn't be a problem. I think they're both pretty good pass catchers. They're both decent at protection. I think Dowdle probably has a little bit of an edge there simply because he's bigger and just a little bit has more oomph. But I think it's going to be interesting to watch these two kind of compete in the preseason, because I really do think that that's where a lot of this competition is going to need to take place. With running backs, with linebackers, it's like even when they're in full, go at practice, it's not really full go. It's touch them up. It's tap them, right? It's like it's a thump and then a stop. Yeah. And that's also kind of the issue we've had with Deuce Vaughn too. Not an issue, but we haven't really seen Deuce Vaughn, we don't really know what's good with Deuce Vaughn, right? Because so many times in practice you see him get tapped and you're like, well, would he have gone down there? Probably, because he's 5'5", but maybe not because he's 5'5". So I think that's what we need to see in the games with all these running backs is how well are they breaking tackles, how well are they getting through the line. Now that it's full contact,
Sure.
which one of these guys is shrugging off contact the best and making extra yardage after they get through the line.
Now, you mentioned at the top, you think both Dowdle and Malik Davis are going to make the 53-man roster, which brings me back to Deuce Vaughn. Does he make this roster as RB4? And do the Cowboys even carry a fourth running back?
Yeah, I mean, I think Vaughn, they've got specific plans for it. And I actually,
it's just hard to keep 4 running backs, 4 tight ends, and 6 receivers.
Yeah, and it's going to be a tough cut down. And maybe they don't keep all these guys. Maybe what they do is they cut Davis or Dowdle and then practice squad them and then call them up from the practice squad.
See, I think that's likely. And I know he's your guy, but I wonder.
Don't you dare say it, sir.
Well, no, not Hunter Lipke. I'm not saying him.
Oh, okay.
I wonder with like somebody like Dowdle, who I don't believe has played in a regular season game yet, if he's just not somebody that is more likely to make it through the practice or make it through waivers, and somebody that you can kind of pull on and off the active roster. That's not to say that he's not the better of the 2 running backs, but maybe just because of roster mechanism, he's the one that's more likely to be cut.
I think Dowdle has played in the regular season, but I don't think that prevents him from being on the practice squad anymore.
No, I'm saying like we just don't have a lot of tape from him.
Oh, yeah, we don't have a lot of tape on either of these guys.
Which I just wonder if it would be more likely that Dowdle could get through waivers than somebody like Malik Davis. That's all.
Maybe, yeah, because you're right, because Davis definitely had more snaps like on tape, especially last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, and Dowdle, I think his regular season stuff was like maybe his rookie year, which was like 4 years now. So
yeah,
I mean, I think that could be a very strong possibility that they try to sneak one of these guys through onto the practice squad and use a call ups that way, and then maybe flip it mid-season. They cut Davis or cut.
And I wouldn't even be surprised if like the Cowboy again. I'm just saying this. If Dowdle's like RB3. But he's not on the active roster. He's ahead of Deuce Vaughn, but it's Dowdle who's active every week, and Vaughn is the one who is inactive. But because Deuce Vaughn has the draft capital, they don't want to expose him to waivers.
Well, that's kind of what I was just going to say is that I almost wonder if they don't view them as separate running back positions.
Maybe.
Right? Like the Pollard role, and Vaughn is the backup to the Pollard role, and Malik Davis and Rico are kind of cobbling together the Zeke role or the other running back, the bigger back role, right? So it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, exactly. I think Cutdown's going to tell us a lot about these players, but also how the Cowboys view how they want to deploy their running backs. I think we're going to learn a lot from this.
We also got some injury updates for the Cowboys, including one from Mozzie Smith. We should talk about Luke Schoonmaker. We've got one on the center, Tyler Biadasz. We will get to all of those next. All right, Landon, we've got a bunch of injury news that I wanted just to recap for the Cowboy fans out there that maybe aren't aware. Let's start with Tyler Biadasz, who got rolled up in practice on Tuesday. Was grabbing his ankle, kind of had to leave the field, couldn't finish practice. Seems like he's going to be okay. It was from what I heard, a low ankle sprain, nothing major. It seems like the Cowboys dodged a bullet here for all intents and purposes.
I would not be surprised if we learned that he had this injury earlier. There has been a couple different times when I've noticed him on the ground and taking a second to get up. There was at least one other time in a practice. I think it was all those days went together. I think it was last Thursday where he was on the ground and I kind of saw him and I was like, get up, get up, get up, get up. And he got up. Right. But I am wondering if, I think it was an ankle then that if he isn't just having an issue that was bothering him, that he was really worried about kind of re-injuring there. But the Cowboys are not worried about it. If he's still on the field, then it's probably just a nagging thing. But it might be something to keep an eye on. And if you don't see him practicing for, or getting more vet days in these next coming weeks than he had previously, that could be what we're talking about.
I also want to remind people that he is one of the toughest players on the team. Remember, he had a pretty severe high ankle sprain that he suffered in week 17 last year, didn't play
Correct.
week 18, played the playoff games against the Bucks and the 49ers and played awesome in both of those games. So that's a pretty bad injury, but to come back after a week, I think he's going to be okay.
He's had a
So,
really great camp too. I will just
yeah,
say that, like, it's easy to kind of just forget that, Biotish is one of those players that, like, you feel like he's slightly better than replacement, and earlier on you're trying to replace him, and now it's like, okay, he's good enough. But I think this offseason he's maybe has taken a step with Duke in his training. He looks stronger. He's moving bodies now in a
yep.
way that I feel like he wasn't previously. So it's good to see that he's not seriously injured, and I hope they kind of take care of him the rest of the training camp sessions.
We should mention Mozzie Smith had a precautionary MRI on his knee. Sounds like he was dealing with a little bit of tendonitis. I also just call that a rookie going through their first training camp. Doesn't seem like the Cowboys are worried. I saw Michael Gelkin report say that he's fine. Maybe he doesn't practice on Thursday, but Jerry Jones made it seem like he was going to be good to play in the preseason game. But again, prefacing this with what Jerry Jones says,
Yeah.
don't put a lot of stock into that.
Keep your eye on it. That's all. I mean, it's not great that he needed to miss practice and take an MRI for it. Maybe it's just precautionary. He did have an incredible day of his best day of practice.
Yeah.
Previous to that, so he obviously was feeling good enough for that. But something to keep an eye on. Maybe for later in the season, if we start seeing this crop up again later, we'll know where it started.
A couple other things really quickly before we head out. Luke Schoonmaker practiced on Tuesday. Actually had a touchdown in one of the drills. He said he felt great. He said he had no problems at all. Just something to monitor. I'm going to be interested to see, like, if the Cowboys try to limit his snaps or maybe give him like 2 days on, 1 day off. But I know that we mentioned earlier in the week that it's probably unlikely that we see him in the preseason game. Now I don't know. Like, I won't be surprised if we see him out there against Jacksonville on Saturday.
I think we'll know a lot more tomorrow, right? When I
Yeah.
get out to practice, if he's out there, kind of going full, I wouldn't be surprised if he's in team drills tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up, maybe just giving him a dozen snaps or something,
Sure.
like
Just to get him on the field.
just to get him on the field. He looks good. He not only did he say it didn't hurt, he says it doesn't hurt. He says it doesn't feel it anymore, which is great. So I mean, obviously the training staff here is maybe the best in the NFL, so they're going to make sure they get him to a spot where he feels comfortable, and we'll just see how it goes from there.
Last couple notes before we move on. I mentioned Marlon Jones has a groin injury. Mike McCarthy said he's going to miss the next couple of weeks or so. Again, there's really no reason to push it at all, especially with him being suspended for the first 2 weeks of the season. You want him healthy in case you need him in week 3 or week 4 or whenever. So don't expect to see him maybe on the field at all during the preseason. And then the last one, David Durden, a undrafted receiver, who was actually named Prospect X from The Athletic, a absolutely fantastic piece. If you want to go and read it, he had his first highlight play of practice. He had this really awesome touchdown grab yesterday, but on that play, banged his head a little bit, has a concussion. He won't play in the preseason game. It's just a bummer for somebody that needs to be out on the field to try to earn, I think, a practice squad spot.
Yeah, I mean, again, like the timing of it's not great right before your first preseason game here, in which you felt like he was going to get a lot of run. Right?
Oh yeah.
So I don't think that this will keep him out too long. I mean, it's a concussion, so hopefully it's not too serious. And he take maybe a week off practice, a couple days off practice, and he's eligible for the next game. He's still got a lot of football left ahead of him. He's going to be playing in all these preseason games. I definitely could see him as a guy that the Cowboys are penciling in as a practice squad guy. There's so much upside there, and he has a lot of development left to do. So he definitely feels like a perfect practice squad candidate.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. Again, every day, we're going to answer your Twitter questions tomorrow. So make sure that you send them into either me at Marcus_Mosier, at Landon, or Landon at McCoolBCB. So we'll try to get to as many of those as possible. Just want to let you know that we are free and available on all platforms. Check out our shows on YouTube. Again, we're going to be doing 2 podcasts tomorrow on Thursday. One will be in the morning. One will be later at night after practice. So be sure to tune in for that. Again, we'll cover practice on Thursday. We'll see you right back here tomorrow, everybody.